Friends, we are going to get started. I would ask you to please find seats. Those of you who are in line, you can bring condolences for a moment. We're going to proceed. We are gathered here today for the service for Vivian S. Handel. If you have a cellular device, if you would please turn it to the off position, that would be appreciated. Officiating our service today will be Rabbi David Minkus of Congregation Road 57. The Jewish people respond to death with 3 words of blessing. In English, the words mean praised is the judge of truth. Let us begin our service with the wisdom of our tradition. Please repeat these words of blessing after me. Baruch Dayan HaEmet.
Baruch Dayan HaEmet.
Praised is the judge of truth.
Praised is the judge of truth.
Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Barach. Adonai has given and Adonai has taken. Praise be the name of Adonai. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service today with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Vivian's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. We begin with Psalm 23, which you have in your flyers. You open this up. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me to lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside the still waters. You restore my soul. You lead me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The substantive part of a Jewish funeral is really hearing words of memory, reflections, the eulogies that speak to the life of the person that we're here to remember. And so I want to turn to that section of Vivian's funeral, but before we hear from Chuck and Ron, I want to share a few words from Rabbi Elliot Gertel, who was very close with Vivian and sent me some words. And I'm going to read an excerpt of them, but there are more, and I can share that with you guys afterwards. Soon after I met Vivian, I was impressed by her devotion to the memory of her parents. She always spoke of their dedication to the Jewish community, especially Zionist organizations. She was honored that they trusted her to participate in events such as her mother's annual Jewish National Fund luncheons, at which young Vivian and her friends were expected to be waitresses. She was proud that her mother was a powerhouse of Southside Hadassah. She also respected her parents' devotion to synagogue life. When I first met her, she was working diligently to find a new home for the Southside Hebrew Congregation Library, where her mother had been a volunteer librarian. She had been storing it in her house. Vivian had many friends, beginning with her own family. I was impressed by how often she spoke to family and visited them or met for lunch or other outings. She was a devoted and in-touch sister, sister-in-law, and cousin. Her penchant for helping people led her to social work, for which she became conversant in Spanish. Then she turned to teaching at a time when there was a real need for teachers. After retirement, Vivian's volunteer work knew no bounds. I remember her best as a loyal member of the Road Aesthetic Sisterhood and as a friendly, compassionate, gracious greeter in our synagogue's Mandelbaum atrium. She transformed the Nelson gift shop into an outreach center for all who visited the synagogue. I'll never forget her indomitable, uplifting spirit. Though she'd suffered losses of 2 beloved husbands and in recent years loss of many dear relatives and friends and bouts with illness and physical pain, she was a positive, upbeat, and determined to be able to be with friends and family, especially children and grandchildren. She was, in all that she did and all that she believed in, a true inspiration. May she rest in peace, and may her memory always be for a blessing. I'll now invite up Chuck to share some words.
My notes. Good morning. You know, Mom died last Wednesday, and it was, not unexpectedly. When it happens, it just hits you. But she died at home where she wanted to go, and she was taken care of by a number of very, very special people that I want to thank first. Orica, Latanya, who's here, and Mary, and Bonnie, and Jeannie. And these weren't just hired help. These were people who provided care with real, genuine love and affection. And these were people we just knew, picked up off the street and found from registry. Bonnie has been a member of my family for over 30 years, and Jeannie befriended Mom and Dick about 40 years ago, and they've stayed in our family. And there you go, Mary. And they stayed in our family and will stay in our family forever. They are truly members of our family. When you think about Mom, she was 98 years old, and she lived a long life. In no way is this death, we put it in the context of this was not a tragedy. She lived a long, full life with many experiences, some good, some bad. But I'm really going to talk about the way we should just celebrate her life and the things about her, many of her qualities. And the first one I want to talk about, she was a Cubs fan, and that's why the picture's in the pamphlet. She was a Cub fan extraordinaire. Her older brother, Uncle Marvin, forced her to be a Cub fan. And she passed it along. She passed it along that she forced my brother and me to be Cub fans. She bought us. We were, 4 and 6 years old. She brought us Cub hats and Cub jackets. And we said, Mom, do we have to be Cub fans? She said, yes, you do. There was no doubt about it, which was, not easy. We lived on the south side. There were people walking around mostly with White Sox hats. But we were Cub fans. And she had a number of other qualities, which were occasionally endearing and occasionally not. Punctuality was not. But if you really needed her in a pinch, she was there. We would often not tell her what time events really were scheduled for. If this were not her funeral, I would have told her 9 o'clock. Seriously, because, people would say, Vivian, she could be late for her own funeral, but she was on time. And then we made sure of that. For those of you who know her, she was outspoken, would be another characteristic of hers. She had an opinion on many things, and you knew what it was. She never kept that a secret. And she loved to chat on the phone with her family and friends, and if you were with her, she was just chatting away. And there was a little betting pool from at least one relative that when she went, that she would actually go mid-sentence. That was a prediction. Fortunately, she went in her sleep, but I actually talked about that with somebody, and it was true. But she did go at the end at peacefully. She had a whole host of friends, many friends from many different groups, and these were groups that you would not have thought about interacting, and they were totally different circles of friends. Friends from the synagogue. She had her friends from the Highlands, where we grew up, and on Bennett Avenue, there was a whole different gang of friends, where she was actually my parents, they were the elder statesmen, because these were people who moved in the neighborhood, and she just befriended them, became very, very close friends. She had her childhood friends, some of which she was with since elementary school and childhood. They stayed with her entire life, and then with their families, and they became part of our families. And her college sorority sisters, where we would have an annual picnic gathering every 4th of July. They were the 4th of July group, and they just, that's who they were. And there were many others. I know Ron's going to talk about that too, so I won't go on. But she had many dear friends who became family. First of all, she had her family. Uncle Marvin and Aunt Janet, who was so dear to her and was always, speaking of punctuality, Lynn told me this yesterday, and I just have to pass it on. My mother, with her, who lived in her own separate time zone, Aunt Janet was just totally frustrated by her again and again. And she told me the story. She went to pick her up. She only lived 2 doors from us. Aunt Janet, and she drove around the corner, parked her car in front, because she was picking up Mom for something, and she honks the horn, and Mom comes out in her bathrobe and says, "I'll be out in a minute, but I have to go take a shower first." It wasn't like she was ready to throw on her clothes. So, and one time we called her because we were waiting for her, and she says, "Oh, I'm already downstairs." Now I hadn't called her on her cell phone. I had called her on her landline, which was only answered in the apartment. She was making up stories about how far she was going, because she knew that. But when it came to her being a school teacher, she always told me, she says, "I was never late for work. I was always there for the kids," who really counted on her. And she taught in the inner city, in what people would still consider to be the worst neighborhoods, but she was there for her kids, and Ron was telling me, some of them even would stop by the house and ring the bell to check on her. Now, and she adored her 2 grandsons, Paul and Mark, and she was just so thrilled when she became a grandmother. Even who's in the last couple of years, that Isla could even in the last couple of months, when she was not very communicative, if Isla was there, you could just see her eyes just light up, and she would just watch her play around, and Isla would climb on her, and we have pictures of this, and it was really sweet, and it also got her to shut up a couple of things, because she was particularly jealous of Sina and Jerry, who had numerous great grandchildren. But believe me, she kept score. She kept score. But what I want to focus on is how she affected other people, some of her friends, because we can talk about a lot of things about her character and how you measure somebody, and I want to measure her by her impact on a few people that I want to remember that had impacts on my life. She knew my son's friends. She knew many of them, and they all called her Hokey, because they didn't know what her name was. Her name was Hokey. Why is she Hokey? Some people have asked me this, just because it's the name Paul gave her when he started to speak when he was about 1.5 years. She was Hokey, and she was very proud of being Hokey, even though it was a somewhat silly name, but she was the only one. She knew it was unique, and that was it, and her grandson named her, and nothing else mattered. And even my friends, our friends, sorry, we would be invited someplace like for Seder, and my mom, being very socially appropriate, she would want to respond to the invitation. She called up Barbara, who's there laughing, and says, "Hi, this is Vivian Handel. Thank you very much for the invitation." And Barbara said, Who are you?" And then my mom, she explained the information. She said, who she was. She says, "Oh, Hokey, sure, of course." That was a big deal. And I got a message from her children and other people who referred to her as Hokey. And one of Paul's friends, which is kind of like leads to the theme what I'm going to talk about now. One of Paul's dear friends, Sam, sent us a very nice message of condolence, and then he put in this little thought. He says, "Hokey was like a planet with her own gravity." And I thought, wow, I never thought of her as a celestial event, or not a celestial being, but a celestial event. And I said, but it really is apt because of who she attracted. When Ron and I were growing up, at some point I realized there were all these people who were like kind of looking after me, in addition to Uncle Marvin and Aunt Janet. And I was like, and it struck me, I said, like, who are these people? Really, where did they come from? Why are they here? Because I called them aunt and uncle. They were all my aunts and uncles. And they were very special to me. And I learned how special I was to them, and Ryan was special to them. So those people I want to particularly remember. There was my Aunt Sarah and Uncle Dick. Uncle Dick was actually a childhood friend, and Sarah was a sorority sister, and they were good enough friends that they actually, Sarah's brother, they fixed up with Dick, who married. So they were my aunt and uncle, and then they became my aunt and uncle, and gave me a whole new set of cousins, and we stayed close, and I stayed in touch with them. Aunt Sina and Uncle Chuck. Aunt Sina, she went to elementary school with, and they were buddies for life until Aunt Sina unfortunately passed away a couple years ago, and they talked all the time. And one of my greatest forms of entertainment was to be at my mom's house, and she was on the phone with Aunt Sina, and I couldn't hear what Aunt Sina was, but they were screaming at each other about something, and it was really hysterical. But I knew how much they loved each other, and it was just fun to watch. And then and Uncle Chuck, who I have no other way to describe him as other than my guardian angel. He was my guardian angel. He would do anything for me at any time, right up till the end. And her other dear friends, my other aunts and uncles, was Aunt Jerry and Uncle Bob. Aunt Jerry, fortunately, is still with us, but she was a college sorority sister, her little sister. They were so close. And Uncle Bob, who was also, he was like my guiding light. He mentored me and advised me on a number of things over life, and we were very close. And they were so close that Bob was in Korea, and she drove Aunt Jerry to the hospital to have my dearest friend when Joellen was born. That Mom was the one who took her to the hospital for the birth, and these guys, they gave me another family that's still my family. Their kids think of us as family, and it's so important. And then I want to mention Aunt Roz, who was very, very beloved. Aunt Roz was a neighbor, lived a block from us, was also a young widow with 2 children, and they were buddies, and our families just became blended as one. And that relationship gave me 2 sisters that I never had. And but the 2 of them were hysterical together on many of their adventures. They used to go on Caribbean cruises. The two of them, I referred to them as hunting expeditions. Because they would tell me about the guys they would meet on the cruise. And they attracted a lot of attention. As you can see from one of the photos in there, Mom was still really remarkable. Aunt Roz was just beautiful. And one of their adventures was they happened to be in Cuba the night of the revolution. Now, the two of them, what they had to do with it, Michael Corleone was not there, but they really were, And she said it was actually kind of exciting, that was her. But that's what I remember. That's what I'm choosing to remember now. Is the things with these important people she brought in life because of, as Sam put it, her own gravity, and they stuck with her. And there are other circles of friends, and I apologize, I can't mention them all, but these are the folks who became my family. And so I want to end with a story which kind of sums up several of the things of my mom, about the favorite day I ever spent with her. And so it was in a message we wrote on her 90th birthday when we had a book of remembrances. It says, "Dear Ma," because besides calling her Huckabee, I just called her, she was just Ma. Anyway, on July 27th, 1977, our beloved Cubs were scheduled to play a doubleheader against the Cincinnati Reds, also known as the Big Red Machine. A huge crowd of 40,000 was expected. That morning, by the way, this was like a Wednesday. This is the middle week, wasn't a weekend. That morning, being the dedicated medical student that I was, I decided that the Durham Clinic at the Westside VA could do without me that day. My energies would better serve the greater good in the bleachers at Wrigley. I don't recall what inspired me, but somehow I felt that you would be interested in going. Since the bleacher seats at that time were only sold the day of the game, and the line could be long, time was of the essence. I called at 9 a.m., cold call, explained the situation, and that you had to be ready, or she had to be ready by 9:30, or I was going alone, which was true. Dick was busy and he couldn't go. Mom said okay, and that she'd be ready. I could hear in the background, Dick was screaming, something not unusual, about getting ready so fast for a Cubs game, referencing the multiple other occasions when your particular punctuality was questionable. And at 9:29, I pulled up to the house. There you were, ready to go. She was the same door where she'd been in the bathrobe for my aunt. She was there dressed, ready to go. Dick was still yelling, by the way. We got to the ballpark, stood in the block-long line, paid our $2, that's what they cost, and parked ourselves in the right field bleachers. It was about 2 hours before the game time, so we watched batting practice and warm-ups and enjoyed some refreshments and baked in the sun for a total of 7 to 8 hours that day, because it was a doubleheader. The Cubs split the doubleheader that day, losing the first but taking the second. She was totally into the games, including harassing Reds right fielder Ken Griffey Sr. Okay, that's who was playing that day, not Junior, Sr. We distracted him enough that he misplayed a ball, allowing the Cubs an extra base that turned into a run, sealing the victory in that second game. He was so flummoxed that he even turned around to look to see who was giving him the business. It was my mom. I was so proud. When the game got home, when we got home, Dick was still yelling, but glad to hear about our great day. That was my favorite day with my mom. And thanks for making me a Cub fan too. I always think of her spending eternity soaking up the sun in the bleachers. Amen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right up, Ron.
Welcome, everyone.
Speak up.
Which one? Anyone? Hello. And welcome. For those of you who might not know or recognize me, I'm Ron. I'm Vivian's oldest son. Thank you all for coming out to honor my mom on such a stormy day. It's perfect in a way. She's not going quietly. First, I want to recognize and thank, Chuck for doing such a nice job of giving me a chance to riff off of the things that he was just saying. It's not easy summarizing 98 years of such a complicated, varied life, but I'm going to try. I first also want to recognize what Chuck said and thank Mom's amazing caregivers, Bonnie and Latanya and Mary and Orica and Jeannie, who nurtured, supported, and loved her in her home. The hospice folks said they'd never seen such good care. We give you our eternal gratitude. She loved you all like sisters and daughters. We love you too. Thanks to the 400 East Ohio staff, Lonnie, Dwight, Arnie, Angel, and Gary, who answered every call, no matter how minor, promptly with good humor and compassion, helping our caregivers do their jobs. And finally, to the medical team led by Dr. Alley and the Journey Care hospice team, Catherine and Christina, who helped guide us through her end-of-life journey. They were amazing. As I said, it's hard to summarize a life so rich and full, but I'm going to try and weave together the threads that Chuck was talking about of all these different aspects of her life, and hopefully you'll learn something about some of the ones you weren't a part of and recognize yourself in those that you were. Family first, absolutely. Born Vivian Rochelle Schatzman in 1925, she was the caboose, the youngest of 4 children of Russian immigrant parents. Before she was born, an older brother had died tragically as a toddler, which surely must have affected the way she was treated by her parents. She described her childhood as privileged. She claimed that when she got out of bed in the morning, her feet never hit the floor before someone would be putting on her slippers. Recently, she related that she was, quote, a mouthy little kid, unquote, and that they didn't know what to do with her. Her big brother Marvin told her that she had to learn sports if he was going to hang around with him and his friends. He also insisted she had to be a Cub fan. She did both, following all her Chicago teams with knowledge and enthusiasm, and she could quote you statistics. She married Dr. Paul Schutz after college. They'd met years before at a wedding, but she made him wait until she graduated college. They moved back to Chicago after his discharge from the Air Force, living initially with my grandparents, her parents, as did all her siblings when they were first married. The deal was each one was gifted a lot to build a house on when they got married, and as each one waited for their house to be built, they lived at my grandparents' house. So we literally all lived sequentially in the same bedroom, in the same house, 2 blocks away from the 3 lots that they bought to keep the family together. We were the last, the youngest, and so we got the corner lot. We saw each other every day, all of us. My mother's brother lived next door, Marvin, and his wife Ruth. Next door to that, my mother's sister Janet and her husband Milton. My cousins Lynn and Walter, my cousin Barbara. It was just one huge extended family that was closer than close. We were more like brothers and sisters than we were like cousins. Add that to, like Chuck described, the innumerable relatives, mostly Northsiders, that were hard for us to keep straight, but she knew them all, in depth, all the details, and could help me sort it out when I couldn't remember which cousin was which.
Recording in progress.
She also made sure that we all got together regularly as a family, the extended family. Unfortunately, tragically, Paul passed away in 1956, leaving her with two young boys, us. Her fairy tale life was over. My grandmother, Bubby Doris, said to her later that Mom was like a fierce tigress protecting her young. She became a school teacher to support the family, a job schedule that gave her more time with us. She stubbornly refused help. And if you hear the word stubborn occasionally, it comes up again and again. She stubbornly refused help. She, AKA we, were going to do it her way. She taught me and my brother how to navigate the world, to be self-sufficient in case something ever happened to her. She was our lifeboat. She showed me how to open a bank account, how to make a deposit, how to take a bus. We shopped at friends and family stores for everything from shoes to clothes to cars, or in the basement thrift section at Marshall Fields. We got a lot of hand-me-downs from my older cousins to use when we grew into them. At summer camp, you had to be on your toes, because when they went through the list of lost items, you had to be responding. I responded to Walter Rappaport, Larry Barkin, Jerry, Hartley Cheelan. I refused to claim an item when they called out Lynn Rappaport or Barbara Schatzman. I don't know that one. When my cousin's unused trombone became available, Mom decided that I had great potential as a trombonist. Fortunately in the family, Mike Channon taught music and he was my instructor. We got it at a discount. Several years later, Mom married Dick Handel. With Dick came a whole new extended family that Chuck mentioned and with whom we remained very close. They were married 25 years before sadly he passed away. Widowed twice, she said that was enough for her, and she devoted herself to the rest of the family, especially her grandsons Paul and Mark, who she treasured. With each new generation, she repeated the process of connection. She dispensed love, guidance, compassion, and wisdom to all who asked her, and even those that didn't. She was the go-to person in the family for relatives near and far. She was blessed to live long enough to witness the birth of her great-granddaughter, Isla, which brought her great joy. But family wasn't limited to blood relatives, and as Chuck mentioned, we had this extended family of aunts and uncles who weren't really our aunts and uncles, but were our aunts and uncles. Uncle Chuck and Aunt Sina, Uncle Bob and Aunt Jerry, Uncle Dick and Aunt Sarah. As Chuck said, these people they looked out for us. We always knew we could count on them. She also adopted people into the family, friends of friends, people who had lost parents, Karen, Candy, Lisa, Alex, Jeff, Winston. She took on the role of surrogate mother or grandmother to those who had lost their own or needed someone that they could trust to be a mentor or a confidant, offering unending emotional bond of love, guidance, and safety. When she grudgingly decided to give up her house because she could no longer take care of it herself, she moved downtown to a condo where she had a pool to do aqua exercises and be close to the activities she loved. She repeatedly, can I say stubbornly, refused to consider assisted living. She wanted her privacy, and she passed away peacefully at home, in her bed, in her room, which is what she wanted. Okay, a list of these kind of threads I was talking about. Educational professional. She graduated from Parkside Elementary, Hyde Park High School, and University of Illinois. Me too. She studied to be a social worker and for a time worked in the old Pullman neighborhood, a rough place which scared my grandfather, but that did not deter her. After Paul died, she became a school teacher to better mesh with her young son's schedule. She taught everything from preschool to 8th grade science, all on the south side to be closer to home. She was involved with the development of a program to teach inner city children how to communicate effectively in the world outside of their homes while still honoring the colloquialisms and accents they heard at home, so as not to embarrass or belittle their parents. After hearing a national request for proposals, she organized a science project with one of her classes that sent seeds into space to see if the plants would grow back on Earth. They did. As one friend said, she was the consummate teacher, not just in her classroom, but in all her interactions in life. Clubs. Chuck mentioned a couple of them. She was in a lot of clubs. The Mishpacha Club, that's family in Yiddish, for the holidays life cycle events. The Ladies' Aid, I'm not sure. I think all they did was play mahjong and bridge. They called themselves the Ladies' Aid. The sisterhood at the synagogue. The Jackson Highlands Neighborhood Association, of which she was the matriarch and historian, having lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else, let alone anyone else could even remember. The 4th of July group that Chuck talked about, her old sorority sisters. Then there was the arts section of Mom's life. She was a lifelong subscriber to the symphony. She loved the symphony. She took me there when I was in grammar school to attend the children's concerts. She would lose herself completely in the music. It would take away all of her fears and cares and worries. She just reveled in hearing the music. That didn't stop her from criticizing a guest soloist or conductor if the performance didn't quite measure up to her standards. She was a life member of the Art Institute, subscriber to the Goodman Theater, the Court Theater, and the Lyric Opera. Sports, as Chuck mentioned, a Cub fan, diehard. I will tell you, and this is not an exaggeration, I truly believe the Cubs saved her life. We had gone on a trip and come back in September, or end of August, September, and she came down with a terrible case of the flu, so bad that she got admitted to Northwestern Hospital. She was laying there in bed. She was in her 90s. The doctors said, this is 2016, the doctors are saying it's not looking good. She was laying there in bed, her mouth kind of drooping open, and she says to me, Ronnie, I'm tired. I've had a good run. I was like, whoa, Mom, what? I sort of panicked, and then I said to myself, wait a minute, Mom, the Cubs are going to be in the series this year. You can't miss that. I swear, her eyes started to flicker. She started looking around. She said, you're right. I can't miss that. The next day, she was sitting in a chair next to the bed. I've got pictures to prove it. Anyone wants to see it. And within 2 days, she was going to be discharged home. She's too weak to go home, so she went to a nursing facility to recuperate. Like I said, the Cubs saved her life. She also tolerated the Bears, said they're bums. She followed the Blackhawks and the Bulls. And somewhat strangely, just recently, she got hooked on Formula One car racing, thanks to her grandson Paul, who introduced her to this. And she had a favorite Mexican driver that she followed on Formula One on the weekends. Friends, okay, who has friends for 90 years? She did. How many best friends can someone have? All her friends were her best friends. Who never unfriends a friend? She never unfriended a friend. All the names were mentioned before, I won't go over them again. She was loyal to her family, colleagues, neighborhood, alma mater, causes. When the neighborhood changed rapidly when we were kids, and many of our friends and relatives moved out, she stayed because she said, this is our neighborhood. Why should I leave it? She greeted the newcomers with open arms and soon pulled them into her cosmic orbit. We were Southsiders and we were proud of it. Community service, you heard a little bit about the fact that she worked at the synagogue. She also, with Dick, were early in the hospice movement, volunteer at hospice. They would go to visit patients and offer support and encouragement to people back then when most people didn't even know what hospice was. Did you know she had her own radio show? I guess that shouldn't be a surprise. She worked through Lighthouse for the Blind, which is now called the Lighthouse Institute. She did weekly readings for blind listeners. She followed in the footsteps of her sister and grandmother and her mother at the synagogue. She was our den mother for my Cub Scout troop in our basement, in between doing all these other things. So I'll close with a couple of memories that I have to just trying to capture a little bit of the life lessons that Mom taught. She had the soft side, the sweet side. She put us to bed each night by saying our prayers and then softly singing, "You are my sunshine." I'll say that again because it didn't come out. She sang, "You are my sunshine," after we said our prayers. When I was 7, well, she was cooking dinner in the kitchen after a long day at work. And I complained to her, "I'm bored." She looked at me and said, "Bored? You're bored? Why don't you stand in the corner, jump up and down, and sing America?" I thought about it. I once called her Mrs. Mother when she was my substitute teacher in grammar school. She thought it was so funny that she submitted the story to the Tribune and they published it so the whole world could know what an idiot I was. She thought it was cute. When I whined that how could she send me to that high school that I was going to, which was rough, which times felt like a war zone, she said, "You know, you'll learn there more than they teach in books. You'll learn how to figure it out. And by the way, they got books, they got teachers, they got a library, you can learn." At age 50, 35 years after the event, I confessed to her that I had altered the grades in my high school course book to avoid the consequences of showing up with bad grades. I had to come clean. I told her and she stared at me for a minute. And this is what she said. "So, are you proud of yourself?" Finally, when I was a teenager, a young boy came to our front door. He rang the bell, and I answered, and I said, "Yes, can I help you?" He says, "Can I speak to Mrs. Handel?" I said, "Sure. Yeah, who's this? Who are you?" "My name's Rodney." I said, "Does she know you, Rodney?" He said, "Yeah, she knows me. I'm in her class." I said, "Do you want to come in?" He said, "No, I'll wait right here." So he waits by the front door. I go find Mom. She's back there somewhere doing something. I said, "There's a guy out here who says his name is Rodney. He says he's in your class. He wants to talk to you." She goes, "Oh, Rodney. He's here. He wants to talk to me. You know who that is." I said, "No, Ma, I don't know who it is. His name is Rodney." She says, "Oh, that's Jeff Fort's little brother." She says, I said, "What?" Jeff Fort, for those of you who might not know, was the head of the Blackstone Rangers gang, who's currently serving like 170 years in prison for murder and whatever. This is supposed to be his brother, and he's over at our house. He just says, "What does he want?" I said, "I don't know, he won't tell me." I go to the front door, and she says, "Rodney, what are you doing here?" I said, "Mrs. Handel, I'm failing your class, and that just can't happen." She goes, "Well, it won't happen if you do the work, Rodney. Do the work, and you'll pass my class." He goes, "No, you don't understand. This just can't happen. Mrs. Handel, if I fail your class, I'm afraid I'm going to have to talk to my brother, Jeff, and I'm afraid he's going to hurt your people." And I said to myself, I'm her people. I'm her people. And I'm thinking, Mom, give the guy a C and let's call it good. Nope. She said, "Well, Rodney, that's interesting. You're going to talk to your brother? You know what, Rodney? Here's what I would like you to do. I want you to go talk to your brother, and I want you to tell him that I want to talk to him. Because when I tell him what you've been doing in my class, I think you're the one who's going to get hurt, not me." I've been thinking, I'm packing. I'm out of here. No forwarding address. And she just looked him down. He got like this and went, "Okay." And then he just walked off down the street. I needed to take like a long nap. She just went back to doing whatever she was doing. Anyway, fun-loving, funny, curious, caring, compassionate, and loyal, but also fearless, fierce, determined, and gritty. Maybe a little stubborn at times and always late, Mom was all those things, but our world won't be the same without her. Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck and Ron. That was beautiful. I just have a few words to share as well. One of the privileges of being a rabbi is being let into people's lives, both the mundane and the banal moments, but also the intimate moments, the emotional ones. But with Vivian, I really only had the mundane ones. Running into her once a week for 10 years, or almost 10 years, and the only thing that interrupted those weekly interactions was a pandemic. Anytime I went to the bathroom or to fill up my water bottle for coffee, I ran into Vivian. And it was never just a wave or I got to use the facilities. We had to stop and chat. But it wasn't until I sat with Ron and Chuck and Paul the other day that I got the other side. That I got a glimpse into 98 years of something so much more profound, so much more meaningful than those little interactions, being badgered to get my flu shot. I saw the fullness of an unbelievable life. One that knew a lot of tragedy, a lot of hardship and difficulty that she never let on to me. And I was left to wonder after I got off the Zoom how many other people interacted with Vivian and only knew the fun side. I also didn't know she was a Cubs fan, but I won't hold that against her. How many people we interact with in our lives do we not get to see the fullness of because we don't ask? And to me, I think that's a lesson that I'm taking away from hearing these stories, from the privilege that I get to be let into these moments, to be a fly on the wall, to hear stories of who a person is. And I'm endlessly thankful for that, for you giving me that experience to get to know someone who I thought I knew, who I interacted with every day, every week. Because I married Paul and Lauren, I knew that she was hokey, but what that meant, I didn't get to know. And I'm grateful for that. Vivian was a mother, a caretaker, a teacher, Mrs. Mom, a Southsider who stayed, a welcoming presence, someone who did not need to be told to be caring and welcoming, but she lived it. She didn't need to be told to be a port in a storm for someone in desperate need of that buoy. She was self-sufficient, a teacher of those essential life skills, with or without a heavy hand. Vivian was an inspiration on how to stick to your goals and your plans, how not to be intimidated by what life throws at you, and when it does, you keep going. She had grit, she was fierce, and fiercely stuck to those goals. And over the last 48 hours, as I've been thinking about what to say, have been reflecting on these stories and these memories, there's only one teaching that I thought of. It's a rabbinic teaching that I'm guessing that Vivian did not know, but she didn't need to have studied the text because she lived it. She lived out its truth. It's a very old teaching. It goes like this. Rabbi Shimon taught that it is possible to wear 3 crowns in life. There's the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of kingship. The crown of Torah, anyone can have. Anyone can choose to study. The crown of priesthood, that's given to you. And same with kingship, but even fewer people are given that. But the rabbis teach The crown of a good name exceeds all of these. Not everyone chooses to devote themselves to a life well lived, to making meaning in the world, to being better, to leaving the world better than you found it. Those other things are handed down to you, and you can honor those or not, and far too often they're not honored. But she is the wisdom that Rabbi Shimon taught. She earned that good name, that crown that is on her head now. That is what 98 years wrought. 98 years of family and friends, community members, and passers-by knowing that Vivian had that crown on her head. Not one that was given to her or endowed through wealth, but by determination, grit, and love. And the last thing I'll share is each of you in this room have a story, have a connection, whether it's to Vivian or to someone who's a family member. Share those stories. That's the wisdom that our tradition wants us to embrace, to share those stories, and that's how a blessing becomes a living blessing. And may her memory always be for a blessing. I'll ask you to rise as we say the El Malay, the memorial prayer. El Malay Rachamim, Shochen Bamramim, Hamatzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Chashina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim Atarim, Kazohar Harakia Mashkim, Et Nishmat Chaya Rachel, Ben Osher Shoshana, Shechalachal Olama Bagan Eden Taha Menuchata, Ana Ba'al HaRachamim, Hastira Beseter Kanafecha Lo'olamim, Uitzror Bitzror HaChaim, Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachlata, Betanuach Beshalom, Al Meshkova, Benomar, Amen. El Malay Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Vivian Handel, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace, and let us say,
Amen.
Friends, you may be seated.
Our service here in the chapel has concluded. We're going to proceed to the graveside in just a moment. Shiva is going to take place at the Schutz Residence, 5th floor, social room, 501 North Clinton Street in Chicago. I'm just going to read this. That information is available on your folder, but I will read this additional information. It will be today from 12:30 p.m. until 4 p.m. Please note that this is a gated community. Drive to 400 North Canal to enter at the gatehouse, which is Kinsey Street. Parking will be offered as available. Memorial contributions are to be made to the Chicago Lighthouse, that 1850 West Roosevelt Road in Chicago, that's chicagolighthouse.org, or Congregation Road Fight Tzedek, that's 5200 South Hyde Park Boulevard in Chicago, www.roadfight.org. For those of you who are online, please note that information is available on our website. At this time, I'm going to ask everyone to please rise. I'm going to ask those of you who are asked to be pallbearers to please join us in the front. Please note that we have cars going in all directions. We're going to do our best outside to make things go as smoothly as possible. Thank you. Pallbearers, please follow me here 2 by 2. 2 by 2 if possible. Just until we get outside. We're going to it outside. Okay, pallbearers. Once the casket is left, you may proceed to your cars.